I'm Reverend Sheffy. Welcome to another edition of No Fluff, No Stuff. I mean, it's real. We dropping it like it's hot. I don't know all those kind of things that rappers say, but I do know one thing. It's for real. Hello, Andre.
Hello.
And this is just a beautiful lady on the end. That's Lacey Horn.
Hi, Rev.
And, of course, we've joined our senior statesman, Mr. Ron Lockett.
How's everybody?
Good.
How does it feel to be a senior statesman?
I've been one for a while.
Okay.
It's great as long as you're alive.
That is
So
true.
we got to start this show with this story. You know, we're going to talk about money and all of that, you know, and how things happen. So I had a valuable lesson. I was 18 years of age. We had a club called the Pre-Sigmas. And Ron was a Sigma down on the campus. He and Ron Hunt at Wayne State University. We would have dances, my club. And we'd pack that ballroom down there, man. We'd make $800, $900, $1,200 a dance. And after a couple of them, Ron Hunt, I won't put it on Lockett was with him, says, you know, they got a new policy at Wayne State that any money collected on campus has to go into your student account. And so we turned over the money 2, 3 times, 4, 5 times, you know, and it stayed in the student account. We never got that money back. After about the 5th time, I realized that they was running the bait and switch on us. But it taught me a valuable lesson, Ryan.
Yeah,
I don't give up my money to anybody no more, and you know I hold on to my own. Yeah. But were you trying to teach me a lesson?
I'm just trying to remember the incident. It's just,
Oh, you remember?
it's just
See, this is why he called you our senior statesman.
It's just so
He been dressing in fine clothes for a long time.
I'm just trying to recall the moment.
I remember very well when they, you know, showed up and wanted the money.
Yeah.
I do remember the events, though.
Yeah, and you remember the money too.
Well, speaking of money.
Oh, more part, you remember we never got it back.
Well, speaking of money, because there are some minority-owned organizations and businesses that may be losing money because, well, the federal government says things should be equal. A federal judge ordered recently that a minority business agency within the federal government has to be open to all races, and that's because a lawsuit was filed from these white plaintiffs. The judge ruled in their favor, finding that this minority business development agency had a presumption of disadvantage, and that, by means, is unconstitutional. So white people who want to apply for these funds, they couldn't do so. Well, the federal government is saying that's unconstitutional. Make it available to everybody.
Are you surprised?
Is that fair?
So here's what I have the advantage of. My great-grandmother was a slave. She died in 1912. So in our house, there's no secret why my father was a race man, because race was such an important factor. And my great-grandmother, my grandfather always talked about, watch what happens when work disappears. They had gone through many, many variations of this where the attitude of whites was based on their perception of whether or not they were being excluded from the economy. This is what this is all about. I call it WMA, white male anxiety. That's why they don't want abortions, because they're almost completely outnumbered. Everything we see. And this is why, you know, and I joke a lot on this show, but I got to be serious. This is why people have to vote. I mean, this is the most important election in my lifetime. You know, John Fitzgerald Kennedy won by 1 vote per precinct across this whole country, or we would have had Nixon. So this is what they're trying to do. They want to flip this country completely. They're prepared to make no longer sacrosanct the things that they used to cherish, which was the law. The law means nothing to these people today. And so it's not a surprise that any advantage we may have had, any opportunities may have been codified in law that we've been given, are all just being tossed out the window.
That's very true, and I think we will look back and we will see the importance of the election of 2016, because 2016 essentially put 3 conservative justices on the Supreme Court, and it's been a fundamental rollback in rights. I mean, you know, for example, DEI is,
It's being heavily criticized.
Oh no! Not only heavily criticized, it's being just rolled back. For example, they fired last week 20 officials at the University of Florida. you know, and that's critical, because the reason we even had these programs were because things were not even. They were not equal. You know, we've been battling the whole while to try to even the playing field.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting is, I a guy by the name Andrew Smith, who has done stuff for Pew Charitable Trust, has a really great book out where he looks at the benchmarks and 54 and then say 2020 or whatever. And with all that has happened with civil rights, affirmative action, the number of white men who've been displaced from the workforce has only changed by 4%. Mm-hmm. What has supplanted some of that has been white women, right? White women have gained access. So I'm saying this principally, not much has really changed. Even with all the margin and we shall overcome and no justice, no peace. I mean, we are pretty much in the same position we were before, if not worse. So the perception by white folks is somehow or another we've taken this country from them and they're losing is just absolutely absurd.
But that would also suggest that the fight that civil rights leaders like yourself have made over the years was all for naught. I mean, if there hasn't been any progress.
No, it's not for naught. I don't want to hear from Lacey. But I mean, what do you think, Lacey? You think it was a waste of time?
You mean...
He's saying if we've not really gained much through all that we've done, was it really of any in value?
Well,
and my answer would be real quickly that if we had not done it, we'd be even worse.
I was going to say, so that's why for me, I don't feel that way. I feel like to say like we're still in the same place or even worse off, I think that's extremely disrespectful to the people who fought for us to be where we are, especially with me being a young woman myself and being able to walk into places that I wouldn't be able to without people who fought before me. But I definitely think that, like you said, Rev, voting, we have to pay attention to what's happening. And I think with young people in my age range that we don't pay attention. So when all these things happen, it's too late because we don't understand politics. We don't understand how important it is to vote, and voting for the president controls who gets, if there's a vacancy on the Supreme Court, they're the ones making the appointment. So that's how they stack the Supreme Court. But a lot of people don't understand that. So that's when we're going to see our country in a whole different.
Given the history of
going down this path, if we don't start paying more attention.
Given the history of this country, I feel like you had people who thought, especially black people, who thought they would never see the day when we elect a first African American president.
Absolutely.
That happened under Barack Obama
and
twice.
a lot of what we're going through right now is a backlash because for the 8 years that Obama was in the presidency, white folks had to at least show a modicum of change, and kind of control their anger and ire. But what's interesting to me in this conversation is where we see black folks. I mean, I don't understand how black people could be supportive of Trump over the issue of immigration, for example. Look at the number of black folks who are now agreeing with Trump and going to support Trump because of his stance on immigration. When we were brought over here legally, I mean, how we get to the point where we actually believe that we ought to close our borders, and that
even
Barack Obama was deporting more people than
I got that,
Trump
but I'm
was.
saying, but why?
Do you leave your doors and windows open and locked to anybody and everybody come in?
Well, we did when we were a child, but that's not because of immigrants.
Well, I have a question.
That's because of your cousins. That's because of Pookie who live in your house.
But we wouldn't be able to just easily cross over to everybody else's country without having documentation.
But the other countries are different. We have bring me your tired, huddled masses yearning to be free.
That is
we
true.
have put ourselves out there, by the way, had no problems. Let me finish. Had no problems with Eastern Europeaners. We've had no problem with folks who are white. We've had no problem with Hispanic-speaking folks from Cuba and otherwhere who are light-skinned. The problem we have is where these people are coming from. And by the way, we've created the mass exodus by the positions we've taken with the governments in which they've come, when we've sided against democratic companies, democratic ethos over military juntas and stuff.
All right, but if we already have a process that accepts legal immigrants through a legal process, we accept.
How are the people going to do that, though?
We accept 1 million immigrants into this country a year legally. don't you think it's unfair to those who are trying to get here the right way? They're being surpassed by those who are coming here.
I'm telling you something. If I'm in Cuba or I'm in Venezuela or somewhere like that, and my life is in danger and I'm struggling to eat, I'm gonna get here the best way I can. And
Mr.
so I'm
Lockett, I have
saying,
a question for you.
Sure.
So, because Rev said, well, why are black people, starting to agree with Trump's politics on immigration, essentially? Do you think that could have something to do with financial? Because we have to feed these people who are coming into the country illegally, which might be causing more taxes, might be costing us more money as citizens. Do you think that has something to do with why people's why people are starting to agree more with him?
Conservative?
Yes.
No, I just think it's just a question of just not having an understanding of world politics and even regional politics, because as Reb has said, is that there's a whole breakdown in all those regimes in Central and South America. Venezuela has lost 7 million people, and it's a rich country filled with oil, okay? But the problem is that
their government.
It's exactly, and we're supposed to be so into anti-communist.
And we created the chaos over there in the first place.
We created the chaos everywhere, and the point is that these are people who just want to come and work.
Listen, if they were coming from Ukraine or coming from Europe, or if they were white, this wouldn't be a problem. I mean, let's face it. I mean,
now they're coming from all over the world. I mean, they're coming from everywhere. So, look, rightfully so, people are wanting to come here to this country for a better life.
I think,
but you also cannot just blindly think that any and everybody who is coming here is coming here for the right reasons.
I don't think that. I think there ought to be some form of legal immigration.
If we have to be they need to fix this. And show documents for countries that we're trying to travel to, and we say the same thing for if you're trying to come here through the legal way, but then we have this other route for people to come here illegally, then what's the whole point of having Homeland Security? Like, what is the point?
Yeah, but there's a whole process for that. If you get to the border and you claim that you're in fear for your life and all that, there are ways by which you can bypass that. Absolutely. And many of these people are, in fact, coming here because their families have been murdered. They don't support the regime at home. So I mean,
those court cases for them are taking 7 to 8 years. So
right.
It's a backlog.
So then,
and it's an
expand the judicial system.
That's a systemic problem. But again, that's it here. And now, that's why you have to watch when you take that position, because you really sound like what I consider the opposite. Hold on, listen.
I sound like a journalist who looks at both sides of the issue.
You sound like the opposition, because the point of it is that
you have to be open-minded to both sides of the issue.
And don't let that mild mannerism of his fool you.
But I'm not open-minded to what the Republicans feel right now, because they gave a conservative plan. They were given everything they wanted.
And still didn't vote for it.
And one person came and said no, because that would hurt my campaign in the fall.
Well, there was
I think Lacey wants to get in here. Lacey?
Well, so I was going to say, did you guys see when 50 Cent blasted the mayor of New York for giving out, how much money did he give out?
So
That's
he was giving out gift cards to provide for food services, because he said that, this is going to help us as a city financially. So
right.
You know what, these
it was a savings for what they were spending for vendors and other stuff to prepare food.
But I mean, people don't even like that either. You go talk to people in Chicago and they're like, look, you set up these rental or lofts for illegal immigrants, but what about the homeless veterans?
And guess what? Guess what? They didn't like the Sojourner Truth housing complex during World War II, which was built for black folks, and white folks took it over. My dad was a part of that. So, all I'm saying to you is, as people who've been oppressed, people who came here against our will, we ought to have some compassion for people who are fleeing an abomination. We ought not to be joining on.
Okay, so I have a question. So this seems to be the issue with immigration. I think we want people to be able to come into the country and be able to start a better life for themselves. Yeah. But the issue is becoming finances, how we're funding, and people are being able to eat. Like, what exactly is the issue with immigration,
Okay,
just to
There
make
are
it
some
clear
sectors of the black
for
community
people
who
are
feel like they're
watching.
being left behind because the government seeks and cares
Okay,
more about
I got the
illegal
answer for that.
immigration
I got
and
the
not
answer
their
for
own
that.
citizens.
Let them Negroes organize and vote and aggregate their power. Because even if
Well-
they didn't come here, the government ain't gonna do nothing for them until we get to the point where we make them do it.
Well, see,
I mean,
now you bring that.
I mean,
that's a perfect point.
absolutely. I mean, they're not gonna
Black
just
people have to exercise their power, not just
absolutely.
every 4 years. When
And
it's
by the way, let's
election.
talk about another
Go
thing
ahead, Mr.
that
Lockett.
the economists say a lot of these
I wanna hear
immigrants
what you got to
are
say.
good for the economy because many of the jobs that they take we don't want.
That's
Well-
true. And that's the whole point. Here's two points, Andre, why I can think about it.
They'll
First of
work
all,
at Burger
those
King for 30 years.
He talk about those jobs they talk about, because when I go to the when I go to Northern California, and I'm up early in the morning, coming in on a flight, I see the folks that get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go provide our produce. Okay? We don't want to, we're not going to do that. All the
Yeah.
folks that complaining about they taking our jobs.
the labor and the money. We
They're
don't want
not
that
taking
job.
those jobs, okay?
Right.
And here's the other thing: the problems you're seeing in the cities are being led by Republican governors in the South. That you talk about Texas governor. They're sending buses. They were sending airplanes to go bring
Well,
those
Biden
folks
was
there.
sending airplanes too.
Okay, no. Listen to what I'm saying. The confusion.
now don't we see the real impact and
hold
effects
on,
of
no.
illegal immigrants in
That's
these
a
cities?
That's a Republican causing confusion. What? They should keep them in Texas.
So
Let's
the
solve
problems
the
of illegal
in
so
Texas.
the problems of illegal immigration should only stay in Texas and the
Oh,
southern states.
absolutely. In this particular, why should they come here?
But
Send
some
them
of
to
those
Montana.
illegal immigrants-
Find
some of those
some
illegal
open-
immigrants want to come go
Find-
to New York,
find
or
some
go to the
open
places where there are
land.
sanctuary
you
cities.
fall into the trap.
No,
No, you fall
absolutely
into the
not.
trap.
Absolutely
'Cause
not.
What else
Send them
we
to
talking about?
Montana.
Wait a
Find some
second.
open land. Send them
They
to
go to New York
send
and
them to the
Chicago.
Grand Canyon and have them carve some statues.
Well, look, maybe we should also send them to church as well. Speaking of church,
Yeah.
Ty Tribbett is getting a lot of flack for what he says that, he says right now church is whack. Apparently, he says the institution of the church is whack. And he went on to explain on a recent TV show or radio show, he said the church should be about the people, but the church makes the people about the church. They're not serving and loving the people. And now this is a gospel artist who's
Yeah.
known around the world.
Yeah. Well, let me just chime in here real
What do you
quick
think about that?
because I've had a lot to say
That's your
about this.
bailiwick. That's your bailiwick.
For a long time. I mean, the organization of the church has changed from the church being there to serve people and to provide for people. Now all we hear about is what the church needs. The church needs a new roof. The church needs a furnace. The pastor needs. I grew up in Tabernacle where all of his resources were wielded to help people who found themselves in need. Couple of things about that. We also act as if the church is some kind of, separate thing from the people who occupy the pews. What the church is are who the people are. So if the church is unfriendly, it's because the people are unfriendly. Now, I still think it's the safest place on the earth. May not be filled with the safest people on earth, but I'll say this and be done. I charged my congregation 3 years ago. I said, you've got 5 years to help me understand this, because I think everything that Jesus asked us to do, we do the opposite of. And that's why we have so much trouble. For example, he told us to go make disciples, but we brag about how many folks come. Think about it. And all the trouble we have is when they get there. The other problem is all these people love Jesus but can't stand nobody else. So busy going to heaven, we tell everybody else to go to hell. So I think the church has gotten to the point where it is further away from the character of Christ. And so Lyle Shallow, I'm done, says, for the first time in history of Christianity, there are more believers than belongers. They say, me and God are fine, it's the rest of those people I can't deal with, right? So somehow or another, we got to find a way to get people to be more representative of who Jesus is, to accept people for who they are, not come simply because you're in trouble, you need a quick fix. And then number two, the most important thing is worship Jesus, not the preacher.
Yeah, but don't think people say church is in your heart, not the four walls of
Andre.
The church with two or three, the church
When it comes to
where
this.
two or three are gathered.
Okay, hold up a second. Let me give you some education. There's a Somos Christos, which is the body of Christ, which all of us are connected to the moment we confess Christ, whether we're baptized. For example, the thief on the cross never went to catechism, no water ran down his back. didn't go to new members class, didn't tithe, but he said, this day thou shalt be with me in paradise. So the church invisible, the Church of Jesus Christ, is comprised of confessed believers. That's not brick and mortar. That's not the Baptist church. That's not Colgate. But then there's the church on the earth, which is where we go to prepare ourselves, right? Now, so, I mean, I love the church. Does the church have problems? Absolutely. And the biggest problem we have is the church doesn't look like Jesus. Jesus said, whosoever will, let him come. And we say, not here, not now. I mean, everything about who Jesus is should be reflected in the church, but we struggle for that to happen. Now, I have a problem with a guy who sings gospel music, who depends upon people who are believers to earn a living, then going rogue on the church.
Well, I don't think he went rogue just because he made that statement.
I think it's rogue.
I think because, first of all, what he said was, he didn't say church is whack. Let's be clear.
That's what he just said.
No, he
the
said
journalist got it wrong.
He said the
he said the institution of church
You didn't say the institution.
I did say the institution of the church is whack.
You didn't use no institution
He
word.
did
You
say
said
it.
the church.
He said church is whack. Well, then he went back and said the church
Well,
is
when he
Lexi.
said church
He
is
did.
whack, nobody gonna follow his subtext.
Well, no, well, I'm
It was his pretext.
That's the
okay,
problem.
Rev, hear me out.
That's the problem.
Okay?
People don't follow the subtext.
Well,
But
so
go
this
ahead,
is the
Yeah,
thing.
but that's by design.
Well, he said the institution of church is whack, and I don't think that he's going rogue against the church because he's giving his opinion. He's still a believer. He's still a church goer. Just because he's a gospel singer doesn't mean that he's still. I feel like the problem is people are playing Christian now instead of being Christians. And when I say that, I mean that he has a right to say how he feels about. He's actually, in my opinion, you have a responsibility to tell the truth about what's happening in church.
And I preach
so
this
that
all the
people
time.
can. So I don't think
and I
his
critique
statement
the
was,
church all the time.
But wait a
it-
second, Rev. I don't think I don't think it was an irresponsible statement. I think it was a true statement for him because he has a right to his opinion and his perspective as a church going person.
Okay, so would you tell your wife that she stank, if that's the truth?
Yeah, if I wanted her to clean up and don't stink
you
more,
you wouldn't
yes,
go
I
public
would.
and say, I love my wife, but she stinks.
But that's the problem. That's why problems are happening in our church, and they're continuing to happen because we don't talk about it, and
That's
we don't
not
talk
me, though.
honest and
That's
raw
not
and
me.
real about it.
I
Is
talk-
it a
I
problem
talk
because
about
he
it.
did it on a platform on a radio stuff?
Let me just say this.
Is that the
I
problem?
want you to
'Cause
be
the
clear.
statement is
I
not
want
the
you to be clear
problem.
what I'm saying. I can critique the church without condemning the church.
You think he condemned the
I
church?
think it's a form of condemnation. Absolutely.
How?
When you say the church is whack, you're saying
He said the institution of church would go.
Well, what's the difference?
He's talking about he was talking about the same thing you were saying.
The institution of the church is the physical being that we have manifested on earth.
No, he
and
was
I'm saying to
talking
you
about-
is that overall, if you take all churches combined, obviously there's a remnant, there's a small number of things that are anathema. The church, to me, is what the church is supposed to be. It's a loving community. It's a place
But is
where
that
people.
what it's been? We know what it's supposed to be, but is
It
that
still
what it's
is.
been?
There still is.
Are you?
Well,
So
wait a
is
second.
someone-
I'm sorry, Andre. Let me just say this. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I feel like that as a young person, when you go in most churches now, you don't see a lot of young people. Why don't you see a lot of young people? Because of the things that you were talking about. And I think the same things you were saying were the issues with the church is why he said the institution of church is whack. You go into church, they say come as you are, right?
Well,
If I leave,
yeah,
hold
I
on.
got- I
If
got
I
you.
leave the club on Sunday and I go straight to church in my mini dress, do you know how many times I've gone to church before and people pull me to the side? You have jeans on. That's not appropriate. You shouldn't be wearing that in church. Excuse
okay,
me. I didn't come here for you.
yeah,
I came here.
I got
but
you.
those things are an issue. You don't get welcome in the church. You get more
but,
judged
but
in the
look,
church.
keep this in mind. And when I
It's not a
was coming
Thou
up,
shalt not judge.
church was the process of acculturation. Right. We learn how to dress. We learn how to speak and carry ourselves. Now, that's a different day now. Sure. So I don't believe those kind of rigid rules ought to be part of the 10 Commandments. Now, but I don't think you ought to come from the club with your thongs on showing and sit up in the front of the church. I don't believe that, but I don't think you have to be dressed. You have to wear suits and all that. I mean, I think we get.
But you can play Sexy Red at the vice president's home. Okay.
We talking about church.
The vice president's house is
Like
not
I
the church.
said, there's a time and a place for things.
I would
but in
rather somebody come to church in their thong and let the Spirit does what it's supposed to do.
Well, it's not how you come, it's how you leave.
You want people to be convicted, not condemned. And we have an issue now where people are condemning people before the Spirit can do the work.
Let me tell you something. Hold on a second for you. Let me just clear the table, first of all. I'm totally unconventional pastor and preacher.
I know that, Rev.
And I've never conformed to social conventions. In fact, when I'm here, I am who I am here or anywhere else. I'm not one of them puffy, stuffed up, separated, holier than thou type of people. And I do agree. But I also want to just say this, and you're right, there's not enough young people in church. Right. The church is not always authentic. It loses its authority. I understand all of that. But at the end of the day, it's still the safest place on earth. It's who Christ has called us to covenant with. And what we ought to be doing is try to figure out how to make it better. Now, I'll say this and I'm done. We already know where churches are headed if it's the same as Europe, because churches in Europe are coffee shops and business parlors because churches have closed. They're closing all over the place. So unless we find a way to really change the whole paradigm, Pastor Joel Stokes has 100 young people come on Saturdays. She talks to them for 5 minutes, gives them an assignment. They go out and do the work, come back, leave an offering, have prayer, and go. She's got 25 people on Sunday. I know the paradigm has to shift. I'm not worried about how many people gather. My ministry is every single day. When you come over there this morning, at my broadcast, and there's 150 people there with the mayor and the city council president, we're passing out food, we're feeding people. That's ministry. Yeah, that's we got to get into a new paradigm, Lacey, is what I'm saying. But I'll go back to my own thing. I would never say church is whack. I might say that the church is not as authentic as it needs to be, or it has lost its moorings. But I'm not going to say church is whack. That's
so you agree with being politically correct. Right.
I think that Ty Tribbett, he explained his statement. When you watch the whole clip, in my opinion, I personally understood what he was trying to say. In my opinion, what he was trying to say is that church has become more about business, making sure people are paying their tithes to pay bills. It's becoming more about the finances. It's becoming more about
that's a negligible number. That's a stereotype. Do you know what? Let me tell you. Do you know what? That 90% of the churches in America have 100 members or less. Their annual budget is less than $100,000. Go look at the council church. 90% of churches in America have less than 100 members and take up hardly no money, and the pastor's making $200-300 a week. Now, you talk about the mega church, which, by the way, is shrinking. Jamal Bryant told us that. He got more members outside the church than he has inside. So these sanctuary sites, the whole way in which we've done church is changing, and it's going to force people who rely on that kind of money machine to pay $100,000 a month mortgages and stuff to change what they do. I agree with that. I don't have a note at my church. We owe nobody nothing. The vast majority of our money goes into feeding people, helping people, and that's where it ought to be. There's a whole movement called Church Without Walls. I don't know if you know about it, where they don't even have church buildings. They just pop up and meet in the gym somewhere, meet on the beach somewhere. I think that the money that people have, God's people have, ought not to be being spent on frivolous stuff, buying preachers' clothes and cars and all that kind of nonsense.
Well, I don't think the church is whack. I want to be clear on that as well.
I grew up in the church. I was in the choir, and so just as long as it's not a church service that's 5 hours.
Was it Catholic church?
But we into the end. Let me just say this is that
choir boy. I got a new nickname for choir boy.
What I've seen Reverend Sheffield do, and I think it's very, very important, and I think we all are similar on that same continuum, is that there's got to be a fundamental change. For example, one key thing is the length of church, and he's been straight on that. Mm-hmm. I mean,
15 minutes.
3-4 hours. I mean, you're not going to keep young people in there for 3-4 hours going through ceremony. Mm-hmm. And I think certain things you got to have, you got to go through a church. But some things...
You got to have an offering.
Some things got to be changed.
Let me tell you something on that, and we're going to be done. The church next to me in Brooklyn was an Episcopal church. This was a white pastor who immersed himself in regentrification, challenging that and all that. He'd have an hour service. Mm-hmm. And I brought this up to 2 churches I had, and they would have put me out. They wanted to put me out. But he never took up an offering. The baskets were at the end of the church, and he told people, if we've done anything for you and have touched you in any way, then God will touch your heart to give on your way out, leave an offering. And this man raised more money that way than I did pass on the plate.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we're going to pass this plate to the end of this service.
Boy.
Thanks for watching.
All right, choir boy.
Of No Fluff, No Stuff.
You got a little fired up, Ray.